In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king summoned Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials. Bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. Now the king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Now among these were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please, test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Now to these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Now at the end of the time set by the king, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked to them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. Now in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. So Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. Now, in the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought. And he said to these wise men of Babylon, "I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." The astrologers replied to the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more, the astrologers replied to the king, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king said to the astrologers, "I'm certain you're trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was, there is just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me wicked and misleading things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologer said to the king, "Well, there is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked any such thing of any enchanter, astrologer, or diviner. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods. And they do not live among men. This made the king so angry that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Now, when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. Well, at this, Daniel went into the king and asked him for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned home to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed along with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be to the name of God who lives forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God of my Father. You have made known to me what we ask of you. You have given us wisdom and power. You have made known to us the dream of the king." Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him." Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king said to Daniel, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Daniel replied to the king, "No magician, enchanter, astrologer, or diviner can reveal to the king the mystery he is asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. As you were lying there, O king, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than other living men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation, and that you may understand what went through your mind. You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. Now, while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them to pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. And now we will interpret it to the king. You, O king, are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and might and glory and power. In your hands he has placed mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. Now, after you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. And finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, as strong as iron. For iron breaks and smashes things. And as iron breaks and smashes things, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of iron and partly of baked clay, so this will be a divided kingdom. But it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so its people will be a mixture. Yet they will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. Now, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever. See, this is the meaning of the vision of the rock, cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, the rock that struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them to pieces. See, the great God has shown the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true. And The interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries. For you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators of the province of of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to assemble for the dedication of the image of gold that he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "This is what you are commanded to do, O peoples, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown in a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, at this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that whoever hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold that you have set up, and that whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a blazing furnace." Well, there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these three men were brought before the king. And the king said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold that I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, harp, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image of gold I've made, very good. But if you do not fall down and worship, you will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." Then King Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing fire. The king's command was so urgent and the flames of the fire so hot that the flames killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these 3 men, firmly bound, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement He asked his officers, weren't there 3 men that we had bound and thrown into the blazing furnace? They replied, certainly, O king. He said, well, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Then King Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening to the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was the head of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then King Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the peoples, nations, and men of every language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Then King Nebuchadnezzar promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the peoples, nations, and men of every language who live in all the world, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs! How mighty his wonders! His kingdom is an eternal kingdom, and his dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. So I commanded all the wise men of Babylon to be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. Well, when the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods is in him. I said, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you. Here's my dream. Interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong until its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. It had beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, and on it was food for all. Under it the beasts of the field found shelter, and the birds of the air nested in its branches. From it every creature was fed. After that, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was a messenger, a holy one coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, cut down the tree and destroy it. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground and the grass of the field. Let him be given the mind of an animal, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven until 7 times pass by for him. The holy ones announce the verdict so that the living may know that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes, even the lowliest of men. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means. For none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me, but you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. But the king said to Daniel, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you. Belteshazzar answered, my lord, if only the dream referred to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the ends of the earth, having beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, giving shelter to the beasts of the field, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds of the air? You, O king, are that tree. You've become great and strong, and your greatness has grown until it reaches the ends of the earth. You, O king, saw a messenger coming down from heaven, saying, cut down the tree and destroy it, but let the stump with its roots remain in the ground and the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live among the plants of the earth with the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him. This is the interpretation, O king. And this is the verdict that the Most High God has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. You will eat grass like cattle, and your body will be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. Now, the command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots in the ground means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar 12 months later. As the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, is this not the great Babylon I have built by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven saying, this is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. Immediately, what had been said about King Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High God. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one could say to him, what have you done, or turn back his hand. Now, at the same time that my sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now, I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble. King Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son, gave a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles, and he drank wine with them. Now, as the king was drinking his wine, he gave orders. Bring in the gold and silver goblets that my father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, so that the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the gold and silver goblets that had been taken from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives, and his concubines drank wine from them. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold, of silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote, and he became so frightened that his face turned deathly pale, and his knees knocked together, and his legs gave way. Then the king called out for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought, and he said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever can read this writing, tell me what it means, will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he will be proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. So then all the wise men came in. But they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So the king became even more terrified, and his face grew more pale. His nobles were baffled. Now the queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. "O king, live forever," she said. "Don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence like that of the gods. This man, Daniel, whom they called Belteshazzar, was found to have a keen mind and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel. He'll tell you what the writing means." So the king called for Daniel and said to him, "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles my father the king had brought from Judah? I've heard that the spirit of the holy gods is in you and that you have outstanding wisdom and intelligence. The wise men of my kingdom are brought before me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they cannot explain it. Now, I've heard that you have the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. If you can read this writing and tell me what it means, you will be clothed in purple, have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Daniel replied to the king, "You may keep your gifts for yourself and give your rewards to someone else. Nevertheless, I will read the writing for the king and tell him what it means." "O king, the Most High God gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and glory and greatness and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language dreaded and feared him. Those he wanted to put to death, he put to death. Those he wanted to spare, he spared. Those he wanted to promote, he promoted. And those he wanted to humble, he humbled. But when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal. 7 times passed by for him until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and sets over them anyone he wishes. But you, his son, O Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all this. Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. While you drank the wine, you praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone that cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways. Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription. This is the inscription that was written: Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin. This is what these words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Upharsin, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then, at Belshazzar's command, Daniel was clothed in purple, a gold chain was placed around his neck, and he was proclaimed the third highest ruler in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians, was slain. And Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Now it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Well, at this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel It has something to do with the law of his God. So the men went as a group to the king and said to him, O king, live forever. Yes. The royal administrators, governors, and advisors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, king issued the decree and put it in writing in accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not issue a decree, O king, that whoever prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to you, shall be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the laws of Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then the men said to the king, Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, whom you have placed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, pays no attention to you, O king. He still prays 3 times a day. Now, when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel, and he made every effort until sundown to save him. But then the men went as a group again to the king and said, remember, O king, that according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be repealed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned home to his palace, and he spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him. He could not sleep. Now at the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried towards the lion's den. When he came near the mouth of the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you? Daniel replied, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and they shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, for I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king. The king was overjoyed, and he gave orders to have Daniel lifted out of the lion's den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Then the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Nebuchadnezzar wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus, the Persian. Amazing to think that God can use one person's testimony to influence the world over and over and over again. Think how many he went through 4 administrations, crooked, evil administrations. And each time the gospel was proclaimed to the whole world because of his and his friends' faithfulness. Pretty phenomenal what God can do with just one of us.